Good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. This is Ken Weeb from Sportsnet. We are Kenny and Renny, and this is the Friday Kenny and Renny show, our favorite time of the week. We're trying to keep the beast fed here because the Winnipeg Jets have created a little bit of a hole in content here right now for the next little while, Ken, which I'm sure Jets fans are entirely happy about and they're going to be okay with. So we're going to do our best to keep feeding the beast. In the meantime, we'll be having our regular Jets coverage on Sportsnet. Had a chat yesterday about the team, and we'll do our show here today like we do every Friday, where we've got two great guests. Tim Micallef is going to join us in about 10 minutes right here from Tim and Friends. Before that, Tim and Sid. And Scott Oake will join us later in the program, one of Winnipeg's finest, I do dare say. Really excited to catch up with them. And then later in the day at 3 o'clock, we should get the word out on this. We're going to have a Kenny and Renny pop-up show. We had one a little while ago when Adam Lowry signed his extension with the Winnipeg Jets. Had the pop-up show, try and surprise everybody. But at the same time, it's good to get the word out as well, because you don't want to surprise people to the point that they miss it. So at 3 o'clock today, we're going to talk with Josh Morrissey, who just had an absolutely outstanding first round. We'll get into that with him and his coach's assertion that Josh really has kind of come into the full potential of what he could be as a player. But first off, Ken, I haven't even said so. How are you doing this morning? How are things?
I'm fantastic, Sean. Thank you for asking. Fun week, a couple of late nights, and we should also shout out all of those good folks who were with us up until 3:35 a.m. in after Game 4 the other night when we did the post-game show after the Jets were able to complete that sweep. Great to see the enthusiasm out there, and those who didn't stay up late, we know there were tons of people who caught up to the show the days following, as it was one of our biggest shows we've had so far. Quite a week here in friendly Manitoba.
Yeah, what's the line? The playoffs are the rising tide that raise all boats, and the Kenny and Renny boat is definitely on the rise because of that. And to your point, I mean, 3:30 in the morning, we shut that show down at 3:36, and you've got people kind of, like our crowd always does, egging you on to keep going. Just unbelievable. It's so much fun to be able to do that stuff, and at 3:30 in the morning have that kind of crowd. It's funny, during the show, my cousin, who lives in Prince George, BC, but grew up in Winnipeg until he was like 7 years old or something like that, never lost his love of the Jets. I'd always go to Jets games when I was young with my cousin Steve, and I've got like so many good stories just from those experiences that we had. But that show was going on, and then buzz in my pocket, I look at my phone, and cousin Steve is calling right in the middle of the night. So I don't think many Jets fans got a lot of sleep, because as late as that game was, when that game ended, I think the party was just starting for a lot of people out there. So it was definitely one of the great Jets moments. You and I have talked about this a little bit, but I honestly think we're going to look back on that game, Game 4, this series, Game 3 specifically, as kind of really going to be, that's going to live forever in Jets lore, I think. And what tells me that, Ken, is before that series, we started talking about this Jets and Oilers rivalry. And as soon as that playoff matchup was decided, so many of those feelings seem to start popping up in people right off the bat. Like, it was palpable. And again, I always say this, it's Winnipeggers of a certain vintage. I was very, very young when this was happening. But I remember I'd talk with my uncles, and the Edmonton Oilers, it was almost one of those names that someone would bring it up and they'd like turn and spit on the ground or something. You know what I mean? Because they were so they had the Jets number, and it just drove people nuts. So I mean, to get a 4-game sweep of the big bad Edmonton Oilers, you got to think it was just absolute catharsis for a lot of people in the city of Winnipeg.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the emotional scar tissue that had built up, not only with the Jets in the last couple of years of early playoff struggles, but the fan base from the 90s and even the 80s. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. There were plenty of times where the Jets looked like they could get over the hump, like in 1990 when Dave Ellett scored the double overtime winner in Game 4 to put the Jets up 3-1. That was finally going to be the year, right? Gretzky's gone. This is finally going to be the year. But lo and behold, the Jets blow the lead in Game 5 and lose the final 3. And That's what the goal you always see is the Elliott goal, right? You don't see the game 5, 6, and 7 disappointments in those packs, in those highlight packages. You see the game 7 or the game 4 double overtime special, and now you're going to see a series of overtime specials. Paul Stastny overtime special, Nikolai Ehlers bar down overtime special, and then Kyle Connor finally fooling Mike Smith with that wrister after Neil Pionk forces the turnover of Connor McDavid. And interesting that Pionk, his admission that he did not see Kyle Connor, and that was more of an area pass after stripping the puck. That does not take away from the accomplishment, because if you have McDavid coming at you, 100 miles an hour, even if it's in his 46th minute of ice time or whatever it ended up being, every time the puck was on his stick was an opportunity for the game to end, based on how McDavid and Draisaitl both elevated their games in those games 3 and 4 after the Jets had kept them off the board. But man, lots of moments, and I mean, we talked about this before, both on the show and privately, and with others, with all hockey fans. The conversation that comes up every single day is, man, what a moment that would have been with a full house or a 3/4 full, or you think of the moments. We think naturally of the game 3 against Nashville, where the Jets rallied back from 3-0 in Trouba's goal, and what that sound was like, or even Byfuglien scoring 64 seconds into game 1 against Vegas with a long slap shot after the drop pass by Mark Scheifele. Like how all that pent up energy just erupts. And obviously we know that the first priority right now is safety and getting the pandemic under control, but you see a game like last night in Nashville, where the crowd is going wild with another overtime game, and you would have imagined, and even Andrew Kopp saying, it would have been two of the best nights of any hockey fan's lives if they had been able to be in the building for those moments in games 3 and 4.
Well, it would have been. If you've ever had an experience to be, you were at the Jose Bautista bat flip game,
yeah,
were you not?
I was, yeah.
A moment like that, and they didn't go on to win the championship or anything like that, but you'll remember that, right? Because
forever.
The sound of the crowd is, and so I thought it was good awareness. On the outside, it almost sounds like an arrogant comment. That night that we won would have been one of the greatest moments of these viewers' lives, right? But it's true. That moment, and it's funny, Ken, because it's interesting because it's at least allowed us to have this debate that we're probably going to have for years and years here around Winnipeg, is what would have been the biggest moment with the roar of the crowd. I honestly think, Kyle Connor wins a series in game 4, in overtime, and sends the Oilers on their way. I still think that you couldn't have topped how the crowd would have got in game 3. Just because of the unlikelihood, the rallying nature, the unlikelihood, the anger that was created by the Archibald low blow hit on Logan Stanley. So the feeling of revenge that came out of that, and then the quick succession, the build of the crowd over those 3 goals that came so quickly. And then the fact that, that happens fairly late in the third. But the importance of it is that Nick Ehlers' goal doesn't come that deep into overtime, right? It's not, you get the feeling in game 4 that the crowd would have been a little exhausted as well, right? and the thing is, in game 3, people would have been revitalized. They would have gone, they would have grabbed a beer, they would have grabbed a jumbo jet dog or whatever. They would have kind of sat down. That energy would have been building. They would have been nervous, and Nick Ehlers would have scored right away. Yeah. And kablamo, everything just would have exploded. I honestly think, and I go back to it because I do agree. I go back to that, when Trouba scores that goal, it was similar to that in that there was that quick build, right? That quick succession build of those goals coming faster and faster and faster and building and building and building. I contend, and I think I will to the day that I die, unless we see something far more amazing down the road here in these playoffs or playoffs to come. But at this moment, I do not believe that building or Winnipeg Jets moment would have been bigger and louder with fans than that moment in game 3. We could talk about that all day, and we'll probably get into that kind of stuff with Josh Morrissey later on today. But our first guest is ready to join the program. We are super excited to welcome Tim Micallef onto our program because he's always inviting us onto his program. So happy to have you, Tim, from Tim and Friends. Ken and I, friends of yours, we love to tell people. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Where's my mic?
It's good.
My
It's
mic.
good. I hear
Oh, you
you.
got it?
No,
All right.
we
You're
got you.
good.
I can't hear my mic back, but I'm okay. All right. As long as you guys can hear me, that's important. I entered the studio here thinking that it would be Kenny Renny as the key on the bottom here. So I put Timmy because I wanted to be Kenny Renny and Timmy. And then I realized you had your real names under there, and I went back and changed it to Tim Micallef.
Now that you say it, that's a good production note. We probably should do that, Ken. We're selling ourselves as Kenny and Renny, and then we get in here and everything's all official. I like that you went in with Timmy. I don't know if you've gone back and watched a couple of these shows, but we've encouraged people to not take it too seriously. And I don't know if you ever saw the Elliot Friedman episode, but Friedge, I was talking with him the night before, and I said, "Don't worry, it's casual. You don't need to worry about it." He said, "Yeah, you'll be lucky if I brush my hair." And I said, "I dare you." And he showed up, and that long hair of his was not quite so long that he could stand it straight up.
Oh,
and
nice.
He just came on the show with just the absolute straight up afro. It was great stuff.
He went Kramer for you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The line is, "This is supposed to be a place to let your hair down," and he didn't get that memo. But hey, Tim,
what the hell are me and Ken gonna do?
Exactly.
Hey, you know what? It's funny.
Let your hair down.
I was thinking
baldism.
I was thinking about, you guys did a great meme after Ken was on the show, and you'd had Ryan Leslie on the show, and the picture of the three of you with the bald head and the glasses, and it's the Spider-Man meme, the picture of the three Spider-Mans kind of pointing at each other like, "Hey, wait, we're all the same thing here." I love that. That was good stuff. Tim, we get into this show, and the idea is to kind of get the story behind the storytellers, find out what makes our guests tick. And I'm wondering if music plays has a deep effect on you in your life, because I'm told that you name your dogs after rappers. Can you give me the story behind that?
Yeah, actually, it's. I'll make the long story short, but I met my now wife, and we went dog shopping. And I knew when you go dog shopping or you go to look at dogs with a prospective partner, you're done. Like, if you get that dog, that is the preamble to a child, and anyone who's done it knows it. So we went shopping, we went looking at dogs, and she wanted a dog, and I said, "Well, what are you going to name it?" And I'm a fan of hip hop. I'm a fan of actually everything. Like, if you look at my phone right now, it's so eclectic. It's crazy. It's from Andrea Bocelli to the hardest core hip hop. Like, there's NWA on there. There's Andrea Bocelli. There's Tragically Hip. I just grew up in this area where I had all these different influences, and it's kind of. So she says to me, "I want to name it Fife," and I was like, "Did you just make a Fife Dog reference from Tribe Called Quest?" And she said, "Yeah." And I go, "Oh, I am in love. Like, this is over. We are going to get married." I knew I had the one for me when she said she wanted to name our first dog Fife. So Fife was our first dog, and we put it out to the group. We now have 2 kids, and we lost Fife last year, and we were going to get a new dog, and I put it out to the group, and my daughter and my son liked Snoop. So Snoop Dogg is dog number 2.
Love that. Tim, how about your journalism influences? How'd you get bitten by the bug, and who were some of the people that maybe you looked up to early in your career?
So I was a failed athlete, as you can tell by the stuff behind me. I'm the youngest of 4 boys, and my dad played some minor pro hockey. He won an Allen Cup back in the day when the Allen Cup meant something. Oh, the chair's in the way, but there's a picture of my dad.
Oh, nice. Now the mic's in the way. There we go. There we go.
Love it.
So that's Tommy Micallef, Real Cheverfils, who played in the NHL with the Bruins in the middle, scored 30 goals. Maybe as a rookie too. And Jack Costello winning in Windsor. So my family is my main influence, just a huge sports family. Like, we played everything: hockey, football, basketball. So they were the ones. I was the guy who just wanted to stay close to sports, so I had to figure out a way to stay close to sports. And I thought I was going to be a camera person, to be honest with you. And I started as a producer in the business. So I just there was a bunch of different influences. I loved watching sports. Like, I would sit all day Saturday and Sunday, and I would do like push-ups in my family room while watching, the cavalcade of college football and college basketball, and then into Saturday night and watch, the Leafs and Habs with my dad on a Saturday night, or stay up for the doubleheader out east here because I grew up in Toronto. So it's just a love of sports that brought me to journalism more than the journalistic part, and you could probably tell that from my show.
Tim, that idea, I think most of us come from an athletic background when we end up in this. You were from what I'm told, a pretty decent athlete, played hockey. I think you were the City TV Player of the Week in football, weren't you? If my research tells me right here.
Decent research. It was, I'll tell you the quick story on this one because it's a good one. So I was a good high school athlete. We used to have grade 13 in Ontario, but grade 11, 12, and 13, I broke my leg, separated my shoulder, and tore my ACL. So it was done. I wasn't good enough. Like, my brothers were real good athletes, like either university football or junior B, junior A hockey. And so I was like a AA hockey player my whole life. And I was a try-hard in football that really understood it, but wasn't good enough, and everyone kind of knew it. But I was captain of my high school football team, like that kind of thing.
You were Rudy.
Yeah, I was Rudy. I was definitely Rudy. And I tried so hard to be good, but I just wasn't. So the City TV crew comes out to a hockey game, and they thought it was my high school, which was Senator O'Connor, against St. Mike's. And St. Mike's was this powerhouse. My dad actually went to St. Mike's, and he played with Dave Keon and Frank Mahovlich. And like, this is the pedigree. Eric Lindros went to St. Mike's. Like, they thought it was going to be my high school against St. Mike's, and it was us against maybe the worst team in the whole league. And we won 12-1, and I had 8 points in the game. And so City TV had no choice but to give the guy who had the 8 points a run in Player of the Week. And they kept mentioning, oh, that could be our Player of the Week. And then they ended up giving it to a goalie who allowed 4 goals in a game, because the guy who came to our game, once he realized his mistake, left after it was 5-0 after 1, and never gave me the Athlete of the Week trophy or whatever.
Oh.
So I never got that award that I tried so desperately to live up to my brother's shadows, and never got to.
Quite a trifecta of injuries, Tim. I mean, how did you deal with that at that
Terribly.
age, especially when you were still an athlete at that time?
Yeah, it was awful. So I went to Carleton University for journalism, and it's a pretty good program. And because I had stopped playing sports, I had no rudder, like absolutely no rudder. And I kind of knew that, like, from having watched my dad, and my dad, rode the buses in the minor leagues and didn't want any of us doing that. In fact, discouraged all of us from doing that. And my brothers kind of had that road in front of them. So I just knew the sports was over, and I was like, okay, I'm going to give up on sports. And then I went to university, and there was no rudder. Like, there was no anchor without the sports. And I had lost a bunch of weight that I had put on for football. I went from like 190. I remember coming home in my freshman year at Carleton, and I was 155. I wasn't eating. There was no working out. Like, I had just stopped doing everything. And you'll be glad to know that I'm around 2 bills these days. But it just changed like everything. And I went from like this wake up, practice, workout, finish school, work out again, practice, and to like, oh, you can go out and drink and do things, party, what's that? So I kind of lost my way. I actually ended up leaving Carleton. I have no degree these days. And I was just, I was in this no man's land, and I was like, all right, sports is what got me to a good place. Maybe I should go back. So that's where it ended up. But it was after those 3 injuries, it was like rehab, and rehab was tough. I remember when I broke my leg, I lost 20 pounds. And that was like, I'd worked so hard to put on 20 pounds because I was probably about a 170, and I needed to get to 190 to play safety. I wanted to be 200 to play hockey, because then you'd really be trucking people. So I remember when I broke my leg, I lost 20 pounds, and it's just like all that work, So whenever I see injuries now in sports, you can always there's a lot of empathy from Uncle Timmy when he sees an injury on the ice or on the field, because I've been through it.
Tim, that idea of you being rudderless for a while and kind of figuring your way out, I really identify that. I didn't get into the industry till I was 28 years old, and that would describe my 20s from that point, was just trying to figure out what I was going to do, throwing spaghetti against the wall, it not sticking. I just couldn't figure things out. I'm wondering how you feel. You came back to sports, and I had a very similar experience of it. For me, it was just finally like, look, I'm failing at everything that I'm doing, so I might as well go try and succeed at something that I really like doing, rather than failing at things that I'm just trying to make work. How does that experience serve you, having been kind of lost in the woods for a while and now finding your way into something that you really love?
Yeah, my experience was, I went and started selling cell phones at Bell Mobility, and I was sitting in a mall. It was actually an underground mall in the subway in Toronto, and I'd only see the light when I went out in my break. And I'm like, I got to do something with my life. Like, this is, and I think it gave me the impetus to apply the work ethic that I had that gave me some tiny bit of success against Archbishop Romero in the 8 points with City TV there, to take that work ethic and put it towards something. And I said, what's going to make me happy? And it was getting somewhere in sports. And I tried to intern everywhere. Like, I called every local station, I called every local newspaper, and the only place that would take me in was The Score. And they were just this new startup station. I guess it was 1999 or something like that. And because all those places had said no, like, I took every inch of my work ethic that I had, trying to put on that weight and trying to be a good athlete, and put it into being good at this and whatever the hell that meant.
How would you describe that kind of little engine that could mentality at The Score, Tim? I mean, when I was covering the Manitoba Moose, it was not an accident that I stayed at the Holiday Inn on King on occasion. They did have a good discounted rate, but may have had something to do with underground garage being right around the corner, and some of your friends are my friends, and James Sobalski and Sammy Cosentino and New Carolyn Frolic and some of those folks back in the day. But
yeah,
how would you describe what was going on in those back rooms? And is it just the mentality of people kind of pushing to get better when you have these bigger conglomerates that are getting most of the attention?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see anything like that again. It was unbelievable. It was just a bunch of people who really loved sports making a go at it. And there was something about Anthony Ciccione was the boss there, and he'd kind of done global locally in Toronto, and he was kind of on that higher level than everybody else, and he had the idea to just hire people who loved sports, and it worked really, really well, because everyone was kind of pushing to fight for whatever inch they could get, and there was a great competition, and the talent produced there was, one after another down in the States, here in Canada. And that little engine that could was definitely, it described, and they get opportunity, which you guys know how hard it is to get opportunity. They would just throw us on the air. Like, I was on the air at 22 nationally without a teleprompter, and doing an update every hour for however long we could go. Like, that was literally my first on-air job, was go out there and look at a camera without a teleprompter and just talk for however long we can go here with highlights. And so the opportunities that we got, while painful at times, served all those people real well.
I love that you bring up opportunity, because I'm told that you are the kind of guy who provides opportunity to people coming up in the business. I'm told Donovan Bennett is on camera because of you. Can you go through that story and just
wait? Who told you Donovan Bennett's on camera because Donovan Bennett is good?
Well, so I'll say I'm not, so I don't sound like I'm pointing. Donovan Bennett says that. Bennett says that he is on TV because of you. He says it's a great story behind it, and how you just seemed like got frustrated and said, "Put this guy on air."
Yeah. I always felt like all of the no's that I got made me really appreciative of the yes that I got. And I always felt like if there are people who are working hard, that you need to give them opportunity. And Donovan Bennett was one of those guys. Like Donovan Bennett, backstory here, and we all have one of these stories. I'm sure you guys did the exact same thing. But Donovan Bennett was playing. He was a running back at the University of Western Ontario. I used to do the games. He had talked to Dwayne Ford, who was working with us at the time, about getting into the business. And he paid his own paying ticket, his own hotel room to go to the Vanier Cup in Saskatoon and to help with the broadcast in whatever way, shape, or form. So our head producer, guy named Glenn McDonald, goes, "Hey, Donovan, what are you doing here?" And he goes, "Well, I paid to come and I'm here to help." And I was just blown away. Like, imagine, like I didn't have two nickels to rub together when I started in the business. And I was just like, all right, this guy really wants this. And I just kept giving him whatever shot I could or whatever role I could. And it ended up being on our podcast, Tim and Sid, when we started the podcast at The Score, he became a part of the podcast. So he was one of Josh Lewinberg was one of my interns. He's now on TSN doing their basketball coverage. I'm going to forget a bunch of guys and girls who have worked with me as interns that are now on the air. Josh Goldberg is on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. He was one of our interns. There's a lot of guys that went through the Tim Micallef internship, because I felt like it was really important, given the fact that I was an intern, to kind of give those opportunities back. So as a part of the program at The Score, the internship program, and I've pitched a few at Rogers. They haven't gone over as well as I would like, but hopefully eventually I'll get back to it when I'm not working 16 hours a day on this show that we're doing.
No kidding. One of the great things, Tim, you've been versatile. You've had to adapt a few times. What has allowed you to do that, and why have you always been kind of pushing yourself to see what the kind of next idea might be, or where the business is going when it comes to podcasts specifically, is what I'm thinking of after, what happened at The Score?
Yeah, necessity, a job. So the podcast started, and we did, for those watching, Sid and I did a podcast 16 years ago. It wouldn't have been that long ago. Maybe 13 years ago, we started a podcast, and it was very early times for podcasts. And what happened was we were on The Score, and we had a nightly show. It's called The Score Tonight, and The Score ran out of money. And they basically said, we can't afford to keep doing a live show. Everything's going to be taped. And so we sat there and, dreams crushed. Here we are in our 20-somethings, thought we were at the top of the game. Here we are, national TV, doing a show. And so we started this podcast, and I had just seen a bunch of podcasts kind of sort of working, and we gave it a shot. And I have these screen captures. They're amazing to look at now, but about halfway through, we were the top sports podcast in Canada. And every week, Apple would send out their top podcasts. And I have one in the file folders behind me, and it's Joe Rogan, Tim and Sid, Bill Maher. And I was like, what is this thing that has come from this? Like, Sid didn't even know. I God's honest truth, he had no idea anyone was listening. He didn't know what a podcast was. He just thought we were having some fun for an hour a day, and then we would go on our merry way. And all of a sudden, it just started picking up and gathering some steam. So for me, it was necessity. It was just, what's next? And I think, this media business is changing so quickly, and you guys are doing what you're doing right now. It's just trying to stay on top of what's going to be next. And that's why we started the podcast. That's why I've adapted and tried to be on top of whatever the next thing is going to be.
Oh, I'd love to dig into that topic some more, but I want to get to a bunch of different stuff here. You and I, or I had the pleasure of sidelining a Hardy Cup with you a couple of
Yeah.
years ago in Calgary, in between Calgary and Laval. Your passion for university sports, university football is obvious. It's palpable. Where's that come from? Where's that passion come from, and your dedication to that?
Yeah, that's one. I don't think in Canada we realize how good those athletes are, and it kind of bugs me as a failed athlete to see, you know, every year we send the CIS athlete to the NFL, and we obviously send a lot of them to the CFL, and we enjoy that level of football all the time. And I feel like sometimes amateur sports in Canada, period, don't get the love that they deserve outside of maybe the World Junior Tournament. Like even junior hockey in a lot of markets just goes by the wayside, and we act like Canada, this is hockey, hometown hockey everywhere, and yet we won't go watch juniors in a ton of different markets in the country. So there's an appreciation, one, for the level, and two, it's kind of a family thing. And I've told this story a couple of times, but I lost my brother when I was 16. And my brother, who you can see over my head right now, played at Western, and he was a running back. And one of the things that I held on to was a tape, a VHS tape of him going for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns against the University of Waterloo that happened to be broadcast on a local station in Hamilton, CHCH. And they would do an OUA game of the week. And I know that there have been different variations of that across the country where we see those games. And I always thought, like, what a great thing for a little brother to see his big brother on TV with a bit of a crowd. And why don't we provide that for more people across the country? And my first gig was, as play-by-play, was the Dino Cup in Calgary. And it was a volleyball tournament. And I brought that passion to the volleyball, knowing that parents would be watching their kids, brothers and sisters would be watching their brother play. And I thought in my head, let me honor my brother by giving other people that same kind of passion that those folks at CH gave to their broadcasts. And so it was always near and dear, and it was always, let me do this for our kids. And what I thought was our game at that time, especially in football. I mean, 3 down, distinct, very Canadiana. And I think like Vanier Cup and Grey Cup for that matter, I have a passion for Canadian football too. And I think that all comes from just there's very few slices of Canadiana left. And I really felt like that was one of them.
No easy segue, obviously, Tim. We're sorry for your loss, but
yeah,
on the play-by-play side of things, I mean, you did the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and
yeah.
I mean, you've had opportunities. I mean, how did you know, or what do you enjoy most about the play-by-play side, and why was it important to keep that going when you had this other thing going as well?
Yeah, I just enjoy it. Like calling a game, there's nothing like it in our business. Like just for me, the rush, like you're on your toes the entire game. It feels like you're part of the actual game when people are at home. You try to make sure that it's all about the game, but you also know that your vision of what you're seeing is what a lot of people will take away from that game. So I always felt like there was like this rush that you get from calling a game that I don't know that I feel in any other part of the business. Maybe breaking news or something crazy, but Tim and Sid and Tim and Friends has always I've tried to make it really laid back and more casual, kind of like Kenny and Renny. And so the play-by-play is so much different. You're on your toes. You can't, when you're done, you're exhausted because you've expended 3 hours of time, maybe 4 hours if it's a football game, and it goes a little long, but you've expended energy on your toes for that long. There's just a rush that, and you can border on disaster the entire time if you don't get the right number, you don't get the right name, you mispronounce the name, you don't see the ball fake, you don't see the puck go in the net at a crucial time. I mixed crucial and critical. Like if you did that on a broadcast,
crucial time,
yeah. So that's the rush, and I think anyone who's called the game live or been part of the live broadcast knows that. And it's a little bit like sidelines. I hated because you got like a minute. Like you had 2 questions and a half, and if you screwed up one of those, if you said critical in one of those questions, you would lament it for an entire half. So I hated like sidelines. I still, there's a part of me that still thinks like whatever Tim and Friends ends up being, there's a part of me that still wants to call games. And I've dreamt of calling, on the big stage, and haven't gotten that opportunity outside of Vanier Cups, which I think is a big stage with a big audience. But I'd love to call a pro game where you don't have to go to local newspapers to find information on the players. Like it's hard to get U Sports information sometimes. I'd love to be handed a media pack. Here you go. Here's everything that you need to know. That would be awesome. So maybe one of these days I'll beg, borrow, and steal enough from the folks at Sportsnet to let me call a game.
Tim, I'm glad you brought up that dichotomy that exists in you, because you're the chill guy on Tim and Friends and Tim and Sid. Sid was the guy who kind of lost his mind. And then listening to you on your Vanier Cup broadcast and working with you on that Hardy Cup, you can see that other fiery, passionate side of you. I had it explained to me that if you ever see those football coaches down on the sidelines who are like throwing their headsets and punching their boards and stuff like that, they said, I was told that's what Tim looks like inside the booth when he's calling a game. So I'm glad we got kind of to the root of the passion that existed with you in sports and that you take into the booth. It's admirable, it's awesome, and it's one of the things that makes you a guy that we absolutely love in the industry, and love that you took the time to join us on the show here today, Tim.
I appreciate it. And if Mike Morielli told you about this hand and what it did, everyone's make a mistake, going to break. Yeah, I was a little bit more passionate there. I appreciate doing this, guys, and I'm a big fan. I love what you guys have created. So thanks for having me on, and hopefully we can continue to support what you're doing for another round or two here. Move on. We'll see. But I enjoy Kenny and Renny, so thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks so much for joining us, Tim. It was great to catch up with you. We hope to have you on in the future.
Be well, guys.
See you later.
Have a great weekend.
All right, from one great guest to the next, and another member of the media who the Jets are keeping working, as we bring in Scott Oake, who did a great job on the first round series. And Scott, I guess I had an idea of where I was going to go, but this is a perfect segue for this. You are the man of the people. It was your people. You stood in front of that sea of people in the whiteout. I'm not sure that even the players would be more affected by the absence of fans in the building than you were. Talk about the difference between what it's been like to cover the Jets in the playoffs with that crazy whiteout happening all around you compared to what we saw or have been seeing so far in these playoffs.
Well, first of all, can you hear me, by the way?
We hear you great, yeah.
Oh, good. We're at our cottage, and I'm not sure. I was worried about the internet signal. The first question I have for you guys is this live?
It is. It is. We've got
no
a
editing?
running chat room. There's no editing.
No editing.
No editing, no delay.
We hear you're pretty good in live situations.
Oh, then is there any chance I can back out of this now? Wow. And again, before I'm sidetracking the show completely here, but Tim Micallef just described the essence of my career. You live it in 30 to 60 second increments, and if you screw something up in those 30 or 60 seconds, you sit there and stew for the next chance you get till the next chance you get. So it's a tough job. The whiteout, there really is no comparison. This is a very antiseptic atmosphere in which we're working now. The Jets and every NHL team that's left playing to this point is doing their absolute best by piping in artificial music and or artificial crowd noise and music, etc. But it just doesn't do it, especially in a place like Bell MTS, when you consider that the whiteout is probably the most frenetic crowd that you'll ever see in the NHL and maybe in any sporting event. I think back to the 2018 run and how it felt at times like the roof was going to blow off Bell MTS. And the streets around Bell MTS packed with 25,000 fans. I said at the time when I was doing that stand-up in the middle of all the people where I looked like Jesus, that Winnipeg had never looked so good, and I still feel that way. And I know that we'll get back there someday, just not now because of how hard the pandemic has hit Manitoba, the third wave in particular.
Sean and I were talking about it before we, at our earlier spot before we had Tim on. I think you were there for Game 3 against Nashville, Scott. I mean, how do you think that would have compared the other night, and Kyle Connor scoring in triple overtime?
Oh, that was a shame, really, is the way I look at it, that there were no fans to see that spectacular victory. I mean, that was clearly, when you think about it, weighed against all the games that I've seen over the years. Jets 2.0 and Jets 1.0 was the most spectacular comeback of all time. I think it even outweighs Dave Ellett's double OT goal in Game 4 of the 1990 Smythe Division Series. Just the way it happened, to come back from 4-1 down in the third period and to have Ehlers, it's a storybook return to the lineup, score twice, including the OT winner, was just unbelievable. It's a game that'll be talked about for a long, long time around Winnipeg. And I think it was Mike McIntyre wrote in the Free Press and expressed the thoughts that many of us would have had. When you think back to 1990, there's 14,000 fans in the building that night. I was working that game, actually, with Don Whitman and John Garrett. The game, by the way, was that series was only going to Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Kenora, and because there were so many other series on at the time. And we joked that we were the D team, and John Garrett actually had T-shirts made up with the D team and mine and Witt's and his name on it. But 14,000 fans there to see that game, and it ended in double OT. And as years went by, there were probably 50,000 fans who claimed to be there. Sadly, no one's going to be able to make that claim about the spectacular OT victory by the Jets in the series.
Yeah. You mentioned Don Whitman. We'll get to that kind of stuff. One of the things we like to do on this show is kind of go back and try and figure out what kind of makes our guests tick. And I think one of the things at one point, and I know Ken feels this way as well, we were surprised at one point to learn that you're not from Winnipeg. I think everyone always assumed that you were a Winnipeg guy, but you're a Maritimer, spent some time in...
Did you have to get that out there, really? Did you? You've blown my cover.
Scott, you're a Winnipegger to me. You're a Winnipegger to me.
We pull back the curtains on this show. But spent some time in Sydney, spent some time in Newfoundland. Every friend of mine, and I did a lot of construction work in camp jobs when I was younger, so I met a lot of people from Newfoundland and had some good friends from high school who were from Newfoundland. And all of them had various degrees of the Newfoundland accent, and it all seemed to come out at some point. Were you in Newfoundland long enough to get the Newfoundland accent, and does it ever creep up? And I guess to compound this question even more, just kind of what still lives inside you from the island?
What do you mean? Tell me where you're at and I'll come where you're to?
There you go.
Listen, you said the accent presents itself at various times. I mean, I can do it after a few refreshments, probably.
That's usually when it comes out, yeah.
We moved there when I was 14, 15, and so my phonetics, if that's the right word, had been formed at that point. So I didn't really acquire it, but I know it well. Newfoundland was a special place for us, but we were all born in Sydney, moved there when I was 14. My father went there to manage a steel mill where I worked in the summers and for a couple of winter breaks when I was going to university. And then from that, when I went to university, I got into broadcasting. So I have fond memories of Newfoundland. That's where it all started for me.
Yeah, no, I did a little bit of...
What was the question, by the way? What was the question?
No,
Sean?
you answered it. You answered it. It was about the
Yeah.
Newfoundlander and the island.
Oh, okay.
Scott, how does
you're used to asking the questions, you're not so sure how you're doing when you're answering them.
I lost track here about 10 minutes ago, I think. Anyway, carry on.
Speaking of how that broadcast career got started, how does a pre-med student wander into the campus radio station, get bitten by the bug, and turn a career out of it?
Well, this is a story I've told many times, and so I apologize to anyone who might be listening who's heard it 6 times before. But um, I started hanging out at the university radio station basically because my late older brother Bruce went there, and he had a particular interest in broadcasting, and so I followed him there, and pretty quickly fell in love with the sound of my own voice. We did a lot of things at it was Memorial University Radio, MUN Radio, and we used to do hockey games, remotes, and read sportscasts, and you really got a sense of what broadcasting could be all about. So somebody said to me after a year of hanging around there, why don't you apply for that summer relief job at CBNT, CBC Newfoundland? And I did. Put my application in. I didn't hear anything for a couple of weeks, so I thought, well, I should phone over there. So I did. And the gentleman who answered the phone, his name was Ted Withers. The late Ted Withers was a legendary sportscaster in Newfoundland. He said to me, well, as a matter of fact, you're the only person to apply, so why don't you come in and start on Monday? Thereby proving the only way for me to get a job was if no one else applied. But that's true. I mean, it was that was back before broadcasting was seen as this prestigious, distinguished career where you go to school to study for it, et cetera. It was a bit of a novelty back then. There weren't a lot of people who were doing it or were driven to become broadcasters. And I'm not sure I was then. I just thought it was a good summer relief job, and I could, maybe do it decently, given I'd been hanging around the university radio station. So I did that summer relief job for 2 years. At the end of the second year, they had 2 full-time sportscasters there at the time. One of them, his name was Gene Ozon, left to go to law school. So the full-time job came open. Now, at the time, I spoke faster than the speed of light. I thought I knew everything, and if I had to, I could get it all out in one long sentence. But anyway, I applied for the job, and don't ask me how, but I got it. And my father was, I wouldn't say he was outraged, but he was pretty upset because he came from that generation that really only wanted their kids to do a little bit better than they had done. And for him, that entailed a university degree. So I placated him by saying, well, don't worry, I'm only going to do this job for a year or so, and then I'll go back to school and finish my degree. That never happened because in 1976, I got to go to the Olympics. Was one of the commentators there. So I, at that point, decided that I clearly had made it. There was no point in pursuing my education. I was at the peak of my career, and never did go back. But my father asked me probably every month until he died about 7 or 8 years ago when I was going to go back to university to finish my degree so that I'd have something to fall back on when the CBC and Hockey Night in Canada figured out that I was no good. And they haven't yet, and I'm still doing the job. So that's basically how it happened.
I was going to ask you about that because your brother is a doctor, and so I always wonder in families with different levels of achieving kids, sometimes to see your one son going to become a doctor and the other going in this kind of play factory that we have chosen as careers. I mean, my sister is a very respected teacher, and here my parents were like, what the heck are you wasting your time with? But I wonder how that was the situation you had with your dad. As a father of boys, I was always interested, and I've actually asked you about this, and you've given me good answers for this before, but, Darcy becoming a magician, the idea of, a sports guy, and having your son go into a career that, clearly it's worked out for him. Seems like it's a career that is a tough career to make it in. What were the moments like for you with him as his dad when you were wondering, where's all this going?
Probably the same as the ones my father had with me, which is, what's the plan here? You better get a B plan because the A one is surely not going to work out, right? Darcy is very talented, and he's got more talent in his pinky than I have in my entire body. He can own a room. He's got the Q factor. People like him, so he's got the battle half won as soon as he steps on stage. He's done some spectacular shows that, Ann and I have sat there and watched them and gone, wow, this kid, he's got something. And he's parlayed that into a pretty good career. So when he was a kid, he, like me, didn't have a particular interest in magic beyond what a lot of other kids did, but his interest was piqued, and he tells the story frequently. And every time he tells it, he gets a year younger. So by the time in another couple of months, he'll have been in the womb when this happened. But he was really young. One day, Ann and I were sitting at the kitchen table at our house, and there was a deck of cards because we played a lot of gin in the summertime, and there was a deck of cards, and I shuffled them, and Darcy was there, and I said, pardon me, I said, pick a card, any card, and he did. I have no magic. I know nothing about magic whatsoever, except I love watching Darcy and, as a result, other magicians. Shuffled the card, said, here, pick a card, any card, and he did. And I shoved it back in the deck, shuffled the deck, and at this point, I was going to produce his card. I had a 1 in 52 chance of producing his card, and I did. His card came out, and he was thunderstruck. He demanded to know how I did it, and I wouldn't tell him. And that really, eventually did, of course, but that really piqued his interest. And by that weekend, I think that was probably the middle of the week, by the weekend, he had about 10 killer card tricks going and was a big hit at every party he went to. So that kind of got him off and running. But again, to answer your question about concerns that we had as parents, Darcy loves to run the show. He had about 8 or 9 minimum wage jobs, every one of which he was fired from because he thought he knew more than the guy he was working for. He should be running the place. And I remember once when he was going, he went a long time between gigs. He used to do, smaller things around Winnipeg and for decent money, but he had gone a long time without doing any shows. And I said to him one day, I said, Darcy, you got to get a job. He says, looked at me and he said, look, I can't work for anyone. I've proven that. and he had proven it. He worked hard at magic. And when Bruce, our firstborn, Darcy's brother, best friend, passed away, he threw himself into his work, and he is where he is.
Speaking of Bruce, Scott, I mean, obviously you're doing some great work in the community. What's it like to see that come to fruition after all the hard work that's been done the last few years here?
It's about 20 adjectives would apply. Overwhelming, emotional would be 2 of them. We welcomed, the Bruce Oake Recovery Center welcomed its first residents on Tuesday, and Ann and I went out and met them. And it was just, we stood there for a second and reflected on, what's there now, which is a state-of-the-art recovery center that's going to save lives. It's long-term, provides a continuum of care, which, we often say if Bruce had stayed in the place he was in for another year, he'd still be alive. So that's why we're married to the notion or the idea of long-term care. 180 to 200 men will pass through Bruce Oake on an annual basis. And we hope for a success rate similar to what our partners, because there's a place in Calgary called Fresh Start that have become our partners. And it's their program that we'll administer at the Bruce Oake Recovery Center, tailored to Manitoba's needs. They have a success rate of 57%. So, we're hopeful that if we have half, 50% success rate, 200, that's 100 men a year whose lives will be saved. And so it's beautiful. It's Bruce's legacy. His ashes will rest at the Bruce Oake Recovery Center. It's his final resting place. So it's good for us. It's good for our hearts to have made something, to have helped make something. There's been a lot of people help us. We're really embarrassed almost to take credit for this because we had a lot of other people doing the heavy lifting. But good for us in that, it is his legacy. But best of all, it's the hope that the Bruce Oake Recovery Center offers. The hope that what happened to him doesn't have to happen to somebody else.
Scott, this question is based off a conversation you and I had at a United Way golf tournament last year, so I hope it still applies. But you are in the process of, or back then you said you were in the process of starting up a secondary facility that would be dedicated towards women. Why is it important to have a separate facility for women and men?
We had a lot of questions during our work to establish Bruce Oake about why is it men only who can live there. So I want to clarify that. First of all, yes, only men can be residents of Bruce Oake. The reason for that is it's a long-term recovery center. it's not a good idea to mix men and women in long-term recovery centers because they're at their most vulnerable. It doesn't matter how hard you try. You can build cinder block walls. You can use tasers. They're still going to find each other. And pretty soon they don't need the program anymore. They just need each other, and they're leaving. That happens a lot. So we didn't want that. The other issue is there are many other issues, but women come with a whole different set of needs. A lot of women are reluctant to go into recovery because they're afraid they're going to lose their kids. So a women's facility has to have a lot of things that a men's facility doesn't, in particular, a significant daycare component. The first thing I want to say about Bruce Oake is that even though only men can live there, treatment is available to women and to families on an outpatient basis. So we're not calling it a men's only facility. We're leaving no one behind. Treatment available to everybody. And also our foundation does pay. The Bruce Oake Foundation does assist Tamarack, which is a long-term recovery center in Winnipeg on Broadway. It's been around for half a century. Our foundation pays to help send 6 women a year through Tamarack because we do recognize our responsibility to the other gender. Women need recovery just as much as men. Our long-term plan is once Bruce Oake is up and running, well-funded, and we've met all our metrics, is to turn our attention to women and establish a similar facility for women that meets their needs.
No easy segue, Scott. Kind of tilting back to yourself, you're known as such a great interviewer, and we appreciate you so much on that front. What makes a good interview, and why do you think you've become so good at that part of your job?
Well, because basically I don't listen to the answers. I just wait to get the next question on, and I found that's worked for. Two things, I guess, and John, and I want you boys to listen to this. Okay, maybe you'll get something out of it. No, it's research. Know your guest, and it's listening to the answers so that you know where to take the interview, and things flow, I suppose, in a natural way that the viewer can say when you're done, wow, that's neat. I didn't know that about the guy. And I think we achieve that when we're not in lockdown and living in a pandemic. We achieve that most often on our post-game show on Hockey Night in Canada called After Hours. I know that's sometimes, 25 minutes to half an hour, but we spend hours every week researching stuff, digging up stuff on our guests to make sure that we can find out what makes them tick, who they are as a person. And that's, I think, the essence of decent interviewing. But there are better people at it than me. Let's get that straight.
Scott, Ken and I, we love doing these interviews, and we're hoping that we can create, enough of them that we can create a YouTube rabbit hole that people can go down to watch all our great interviews. I fell down a YouTube rabbit hole about a decade ago, I guess it was, when my colleagues at CBC told me about your son, Bruce, and the rap battles that he used to do. So if we're thinking about like the movie 8 Mile with Eminem, it's similar to that. These ideas of people going in these areas, people gather and they kind of take each other on in these spur of the moment rap battles. And I loved hearing you talk about Darcy and the pride that you felt and his ability to kind of captivate a room. And clearly Bruce had that as well, because, I would watch those things, really neat, people hanging on his every word, a ton of respect sent his way. I just wonder about your experiences with Bruce, and if you had those same moments where you saw that he was able to kind of capture people's imagination at a time.
Well, yeah, it's a good point, because Ann and I both feel, and Darcy does as well, that Bruce was just as talented as Darcy, but in different areas. Bruce was a precocious kid who didn't say a word, didn't speak at all till he was 2, and then he couldn't shut up for the next 25 years. So he was drawn to that genre of rap music. He was also Canada Games boxer, made the varsity basketball team in high school. But no surprise that he was decent at battles with words, because he used to say of rap battles, it's like a fist fight with words. And he was good at that. I remember one night when he was in high school and was away, so I was in charge at home that night, in charge of the kids. And Bruce said to me, can I go to the rap battle at the University of Manitoba? It was a school night. And I said, okay, but be home by 10. He said, okay, off he went. 10 o'clock comes, he's not home. 11 o'clock comes, not home. Midnight, I'm standing at the front door ready to invoke all manner of punishment as soon as he comes in. And he came through the door at midnight, waving 5 crisp new $100 bills and said, look, Dad, I went into the rap battle and I won it all. And I said, son, that's the way to come home late. Now get to bed. I'm not sure where that, if Bruce had lived, where that would have taken him, who knows, but he loved it and he was good at it, and we encouraged it.
Scott, you touched on the Olympics early on, and you caught the end of Tim's segment of talking about play-by-play. What do you enjoy about that on those levels, and what are some of the biggest important parts of your preparation for those type of events or when you were doing them?
Again, a lot of research. Play-by-play would not be my first choice. I can do it when it comes to skiing. Covered a lot of World Cup skiing and skiing at the Olympics, but that's because there's only one person on the course at the time, so it's not that hard to keep track of them. I remember in 1988 in Seoul, our executive producer was Bob Moyer, and Bob was always of the opinion that anyone on the crew should be able to do anything. And I was covering weightlifting, I think, at those Olympics, and weightlifting and wrestling, I think. He called me in my hotel room and said, tomorrow, Scott, I need you to go call that basketball game that's going to put Canada in the medal round or they're going to be out. I said, what? And anyway, because again, I should be able to do that. And so I laid awake for the better part of the night going, now they got me now. This is it. This is where they figure out I'm no good. But Ron Lancaster, the great late Ron Lancaster, was doing the color on basketball, and he's really good at it because he played basketball in his life, a lot of it in university, I guess. So I went, met Ron, and praised be to Jesus, 3 guys on the Spanish team were named Fernandez. So I didn't have any trouble at all because there was a 66% chance that Fernandez had the ball at any one time. There was that. Just to get away from the Olympics for a second, John Shannon, our executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada at the time, and I was working a lot with Bob and Harry on Leaf games and games in the East, Leafs, Ottawa, Montreal. Bob Cole was required to be on the ice for the start of the game for a Foster Hewitt stamp commemoration. And so John says to me on Saturday morning, we're going to need you to start the game, do the play-by-play. Till Bob gets upstairs. I said, what? Again, what? And he said, no, don't worry, you'll be fine. And again, this is where it all ends. It's the Leafs and Canadians on Saturday night. I can't do that. I'm getting all choked up just thinking about it. Anyway, so I said that I was worried. So I went to Harry for some consolation. Harry surely would encourage me, right? And I said, Harry, you know what's happening tonight? Bob's going to be on the ice for the stamp thing, and I got to start the game. And Harry goes, what? Which did not do much for my confidence. Anyway, I went to Wilf. There's a guy that anyone who was around the Leafs in those days would have remembered. Wilf is the guy who ran the elevator. And I went to him early, about 2 hours before the game, and I said, Wilf, no matter what happens at the start of the game, do not leave. Do not take this elevator up to the broadcast positions, to the press box, until Bob Cole is in it at 7:08 or whatever it was. And he said, okay. So there I was. I started the game. I did the starting goaltenders, and I turned around, and Bob was standing there, and it was like Christopher Columbus spying the West Indies in 1492, right? Disaster avoided. I said, ladies and gentlemen, Bob Cole with the play-by-play. Another disaster, just narrowly averted. My work at the Olympics, I added this up the other day, 14 or 15 of them. I did skiing, I did rowing, what else? So track and field, swimming, diving, on the reporter part of it, doing interviews, features, etc. But play-by-play has never been anything that I ever really wanted to do, and I think during this long-winded answer have proven that I could be any good at it.
Scott, it's funny in doing research for this piece with you. It's clear you're a great storyteller.
It didn't take long, did it?
It's clear you're a great storyteller because everyone keeps saying, "Get him to tell this story. Get him to tell this story." I'm going to go. I got to leave a lot of this on the table here, and I'm going to go with our live audience. Someone wanted to know this, and I did want to ask about this, but Willard Reeves was a neighbor of yours, and clearly that's led to a very interesting relationship that we've all got to enjoy between you and Ryan Reeves, which is so neat to see kind of happen on live TV and the success that he's had. Give me an idea of your, because we haven't even got to talk about you covering CFL football, but how you got to have the relationship you did with Willard Reeves, how that led to your relationship with Ryan Reeves, and maybe some good stories about your relationship with those two over the years.
Hey, there's my wife in the background.
You saw it. Hello.
Beauty of the Zoom world we live in.
Yeah. We moved into our neighborhood in, when was it, Ann? 84 or 85? 1985. We were the third house on the street, and I think Willard and Brenda's house was probably the fifth or sixth house on the street. I'd known Willard before that because he'd been traded from Edmonton to Winnipeg, and covering the Bombers. Of course, I had a professional relationship with him. So we got to know each other over the years. Our kids were born roughly the same time as theirs. Jordan and Ryan approximate Bruce and Darcy's ages. The kids hung out together. Ryan was a fixture in our house. He would come in his robe, his house coat. Sometimes we'd be sitting there having dinner, and he'd walk past us and get in the hot tub. That's why somebody started a Twitter account during the conference final a couple of years ago when Ryan and I were exchanging pleasantries and interviews. Somebody started a Twitter account called Scott Oakes Hot Tub. And it had a massive amount of followers, I think 8 or 9, of which I was 2. So we knew Ryan really, really well. Bruce and Darcy, because he was in the middle of Bruce and Darcy's ages, was a good friend to both of them, and Darcy's best man at Ryan's wedding. And I actually emceed Ryan's wedding, and my wife read a prayer. So without us, that wedding would have just been a complete, total failure. Ryan did give me a couple of hockey sticks as my payment, and I'm such a terrible player that I'm still using the first one. The second one's still in the garage, ready to go. If I ever break the first one, that's not going to happen. So yeah, Ryan is like one of our kids. When I interview him, any pretense of journalism goes right out the window, and I don't even try to get there with him. It's just like, here's my kid, and buffoonery is sure to follow, and it usually does.
You touched on hockey, Scott. We occasionally cross paths, or we used to before the pandemic hit at River Heights. Why is it still important to get on the ice, and what do you enjoy about just getting out with the boys?
Well, first of all, I want to reiterate that I'm the worst player out there, and those guys let me play because I bring the beer and I collect the money. It's a great bunch of guys. A lot of them played pro. Benny, Jim Benzeluk. He's the heartbeat of. We play on Tuesdays and Thursdays when there's no pandemic, and it's really become a great group of guys that play golf, a couple of golf tournaments every year, and the camaraderie on the ice is, I shouldn't say camaraderie, but because we do, we are competitive, the whites and the reds, but it's never been a harsh word spoken. Everybody's on the same wavelength. Everybody plays in the spirit of the game. I like to refer to Tuesdays and Thursdays as the best days of the week. It's just a joy to be out there. If I was any good, I'd probably enjoy it more, but no, it's wonderful. It's typical beer league hockey, right? Shots flying all over the place and a lot of chirps and whatever, but it's an attachment to the game. I think we all have it at some level, right? Everybody's played. Well, you know, Ken, you played at a higher level than than most other people. So, and still, you go back, because I've seen you there. You go back and play on Tuesday sometimes. So, you know, it's part of our DNA in Canada.
We should probably be letting you go, but I have to ask this question. Someone kind of alluded to it a little earlier on in our live chat, but why Winnipeg, Scott? I mean, you're the top of the industry. You're the number one guy. I think most people would have assumed that you would have gone to Toronto or one of the big places, or maybe even gone to the States at some point. What kept you in Winnipeg?
Very nice of you to say all of that, Sean. But the way I view it is that I'm lucky to have a job. You know, this is a shrinking industry, and I honestly, I'm, you know, we joked a lot here, but this is the way I view my career. I hope to do a good enough job every time out that they'll invite me back to do the next game, the next show. And that's always been the way I approached it. Yeah, I guess I could have, and there was some discussion years ago about moving to Toronto, but Winnipeg is the perfect place for me. It always has been. I came here in Christmas of 1975 to replace the late great Don Whitman on the local sports. It was ideal. It's just the perfect size. Football, hockey. We lost hockey for a while, but survived, and it's come back. It's a great place to raise your kids. I just, you know, I've always been pro Winnipeg, and never really seriously considered going anywhere else.
Anything else, Ken? We good?
I think. Well, we could go forever, but I think we
Well,
should let Scott enjoy his time at the cabin. I think.
Yeah. Here's the problem: is I've got like 2 pages full of research, and I've scratched off like 4 things, which means, Scott, we usually ask people to come back. I'm telling you, you have to come back and do this show again.
It's a demand.
It is a demand.
Pick one more thing.
We're gonna have it written into your contract.
Pick one more thing off that list.
You want to talk about one more thing? Okay. Some would call you royalty of Canadian sports coverage. How did royalty of Canadian sports coverage end up meeting the Queen of Norway in Japan?
That was at the I think that was the Winter Olympics in, where would they have been? Was it Albertville?
Yeah, I may have my Olympics mixed up.
It was after it was Albertville. Yeah. And it was at the end of the Albertville in '92, where Karen Lee Gardner won the gold medal, and it was the slalom that we were on site doing openings for the men's slalom, and our legendary production assistant, stage managers, Fausto Belwomini, who didn't care for protocol whatsoever, and there was an entourage of women, as Ken Reed and I think were doing the stand up, and they were going to walk through the shot, and Fausto goes, "Stop, you stop," and they stopped and stood there until we were finished, and then they carried on, and it turned out it was the Queen of Norway. I never met her, but I didn't meet her actually, but that was as close as I got to royalty at the Albertville Olympics.
Well, it looks like
I think we've run dry here.
Yeah, it looks like Canadian media royalty took precedent over actual royalty in that situation. Yeah. Scott, we're not letting you out of it. You still got to come back, because there's too much to ask you about in this situation here. But we're just so happy that you came on. Thank you for making the time. And as Winnipeggers and Manitobans, we're so proud of what you're doing, you and Ann with the Bruce Oake Recovery Center. You're doing great work. It's great to see. We're lucky to have you here in the city, and we were lucky to have you as a guest on today's show. Thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to have you back. We're going to get it written in your contract. You got to come back.
If I'm back on this show, you guys are flat out of guests.
I'd also say we got a pretty good looking line for a Sportsnet media game as well here.
Hey, that's not bad. Yeah. That's not bad.
Why
we should
not?
try that sometime. Okay, thanks, Scott. Enjoy the white shell, and we'll see you in round 2. Looking forward to it.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you, Sean. Take care.
Thoughts, Ken?
Just awesome stuff again from 2 great people and 2 great broadcasters, and 2 people we're lucky to know a little bit, and that's why too, that one of the great things about the show is that we've been able to kind of show another side of some of these folks that Manitobans don't see it quite as often. I mean, they see Scott often because he's been around for a long time, done a lot of great things, but to be able to peel back the layers with Scott and Tim, both love to see the passion come out, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun to be having these conversations.
You know what? Give those two men credit. Both of them have had tragedy strike in their lives. Both of them took that tragedy and created something really, really good out of it. I have miles of respect for both of them in that regard. And what examples they are. I've never had to deal with anything of that kind of magnitude in my life. I hope that I never have to. But if I was ever challenged in the manner that either of our two guests have been challenged with the loss of close family members, I'd hope that I could rise to the challenge the way that they did. Absolutely phenomenal. Again, we were lucky to have both of them on. And you know what? We're lucky to have the audience that sticks with us through these things. And Ken, I'm lucky to have you as a partner. I think of that every day. I'm so enjoying the little journey that we're on here together. I think we're doing good work. I think these shows are examples of that. I'm so proud of what we do together. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Make sure you stick around 3:00, right? Yeah, I'll give that. I'm still doing my job, Ken.
And you also have to give you a chance to say, I feel the exact same way. We're having a good time with this, and just getting started, I hope.
Yeah. Most definitely. 3:00 today, we're going to be doing a live pop-up with Josh Morrissey and dig into the absolute phenomenal hockey he's playing and the phenomenal hockey the Winnipeg Jets are playing. We hope to see you there right where you're watching us right now. Leave us a like if you liked what you saw here today. Click subscribe if you haven't done so yet, because we've got more of this great stuff coming. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you all at 3:00.